the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact. Hugo New Corporation Gold Prize in the Team Capstone category in spring 2003. That means they were the top team. So Zach, Gabriella, Mark, and Rachel, you guys will talk about your Team Capstone project where you performed an internal carbon pricing analysis, right? Like for Stepan Company, which is a $2 billion revenue company with more than 2,000 employees. So a big deal. All right. So let's welcome the gold team. Guys, please introduce yourself. Like, as I said, briefly before getting into your presentation, let the audience know what degrees you had pursued before joining our program, from where, and what you are doing now. All right.
Sure. So I can start us off, and I'll pass it over. Are we all ready, Dr. Sarkar?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So my name's Zach, everybody. Before joining the Sustainability Management Master's Program at Stevens, I was at Ramapo doing environmental studies. So a bit similar. I'd say the Stevens program gave me a more technical side of things, so it was great. Before going into the master's program at Stevens, I also did some work in sustainable transportation and kind of just pushing for more equitable transportation across New Jersey. And currently I'm working in some sustainable procurement and waste management practices. So it's been really good so far. And I will pass it over to Rachel.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel. I was an MBA MS sustainability student at Stevens, so I was in the business school as well. I also got my undergrad from Stevens in business and technology. So that's kind of, where my interests sit. Had a couple of different experiences through like internships and now full-time work within like marketing, as well as more sustainability work, carbon footprinting and LCA. So that's been pretty cool. And most recently, I started as a lead sustainability analyst for a startup that actually is run by a couple of people from Stevens. So that's been really exciting. Been working kind of within that space. So I guess I'll pass it to Mark next.
Hey, everybody. My name is Mark. I got my undergrad at the University of Delaware. I got a BS in environmental economics. So coming to Stevens was a little more, engineering and a little more comprehensive with sustainability. Now I'm currently working for CECP. So they're a nonprofit with around 200 clients, and I provide ESG benchmarking data and event, coordination with them. And then I'll hand it off lastly to Gabriella.
Thanks, Mark. So hi, everyone. I'm Gabriella. Before the master's degree at Stevens, I was in an undergrad of environmental engineering, and I'm also a safety engineer, and I worked for almost 3 years in the industry, in the steel mill industry. Then I came to the US. I was previously in Brazil, where I'm originally from. Then I came to the US to the master's degree, which is great. And now I'm working with American Express GBT, which is a traveler management. We provide services to such as green assessments to promote more green travel to our clients. I'm just beginning there, so I'm hoping I'll get that better next time. So yeah, that's all.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sorry, lastly, I just wanted to also shout out Pratiksha, who couldn't make it today, but she was also part of the team and a big part of our project.
Absolutely. Go ahead, guys.
Awesome. Let's see. So our capstone project in 2023 was what we call adopting internal carbon pricing. We'll get into ICP, like we call it, a little bit further into the presentation, but just wanted to give you a quick introduction. We talked about ourselves already, so I'll kind of skip this slide, but you get to see our faces 2 times here, and also Pratiksha, who couldn't make it with us today. Okay, so kind of just breaking down what we want to talk with you guys about. We're going to do a quick kind of where to start. We recognize as recent former students that it's a bit like daunting, the huge capstone project, and then there's another capstone individual project. So kind of giving you ideas of where to start, like assigning tasks, managing meetings, following due dates. And then we'll talk about the project overview, which discusses our work with Stepan, mostly our project scope and our project approach. That third section there, you see deliverables, kind of just an overview of what the client asked of us and what the class asked of us. So kind of mending those 2 things together and finding the balance between getting those both things done. And lastly, we want to make sure we leave you guys with a bunch of time to ask questions, because it's going to be an important seminar series for you guys to kind of get your foot in the door with understanding about the capstone project and all the work that it entails. Okay, so getting started. I just wanted to add this slide quickly because I feel like it could be super helpful for someone who's kind of new into overcoming and starting a big project. I know some of you may not have necessarily work experience, so I think it's really important to kind of get a big overview about how to manage your time and manage the people you are working with. So I think picking a team leader is really important. I know our team had a lot of kind of people who are regularly leaders, so it was in a sense a challenge for us, but also kind of good because we took it upon ourselves to do our own tasks and make sure we are getting our own work done. But picking that team leader to kind of manage time and find out who works best with certain things, like you can see in that second part there, dividing up tasks. It's really important to divide up tasks based on any kind of strengths and interests. If you have someone who loves doing a certain thing, it would make the most sense for them to focus on that aspect of sustainability. So we kind of made that a priority when kind of starting up the Capstone project. Another really important thing is to plan out client and team meetings. I believe we had weekly meetings pretty much internally with our own group, and then weekly meetings with our client, who was Stepan. So a lot of meetings to kind of maneuver, a lot of time to figure out in between what kind of work needs to be done. So those things are important. Confirming deliverables is very important. You will always have your deliverables for class that don't change, and then your deliverables for your clients who some people might have different experiences than other. For our client, we kind of work through deliverables in the first couple of meetings with them, where we kind of fleshed out what they really wanted from us. Whereas you might be working with someone who knows exactly what they want already. So kind of just making sure you're on the same page as your client is super important, because at the end of the day, we're here to help whoever you're working with, right? So we were there to help Stepan. So we wanted to make sure we knew exactly everything that Stepan needed, and Stepan would know exactly what we were going to give to them. And then that last thing, seems simple, but it's it's harder than you think, especially if you're balancing other classes or balancing an internship or balancing both the capstone projects. Just make sure any tasks that you have are completed on time. Oh, sorry. And just some more about managing time. It's important to have maybe like a note keeper to take notes during all meetings. A lot of times we noticed that there was a lot of important stuff talked about in meetings, and then after you have the meeting, you kind of were tired and ended up doing something else or going to sleep, and you completely forgot kind of what you talked about in that meeting. So kind of having someone to write notes and really make sure everyone stays on task with every deliverable that we need is important, as well as a timekeeper to say, oh, like these 3 things are due within this week. We have to make sure we finish this by Tuesday so that we can have till Friday to finish the other tasks. So kind of just managing time. Communication is really important. We had a kind of like a group chat that we used through cell phone. We also emailed. We also, like I said, had weekly meetings. So we were really we probably all saw way too much of each other during those few months, but it was really important and really needed for us to be able to give our best possible product forward to step in. And then the last thing that I find to be important is kind of finding some efficiencies. So there were some tasks that we noticed we all kind of needed to just band together and work through together. And there were some other tasks where we said, oh, like we'll set up a team where only 2 of us will work on this task and 2 of us or 3 of us will work on another task, so we can kind of find some efficiencies and do some things at the same time, while understanding and recognizing that there were certain tasks that just needed all of our heads and all of our work together. And I think this will pass over to Gabriella here.
Sorry, Rachel, do you want to present this part?
Yeah, I can go through it really quick. So just kind of like echoing what Zach was saying, this is kind of the Gantt chart that we had created as a team, and then also worked through with Stepan. We just wanted to give like kind of a quick overview. This is something that, you are going to have to do for class, but we really spent a lot of time trying to like divide up those tasks based on our strengths, and, really stick to it as much as you can. So yeah, this is just kind of like a picture of some of our beginning tasks and what we were able to work through and kind of divide up as a team.
And quickly for those of you, because I was actually one of them who isn't sure what a Gantt chart is. It's kind of just like you can kind of see it there. It makes a little bit of sense, but like a huge chart. If you haven't had a project management class, kind of like a huge chart that like graphs everything, or like lists everything that you need to have done, and gives you like time frames for everything, so you can make sure you're completing them on task.
Good call out. Thanks, Zach.
Okay, guys, so before we go on to the specific details of the project, I will present the project overview. So first of all, a little bit of context about our client. Stepan is the multinational company in the chemical industry, serving a broad range of industries. Stepan is traded on the New York Stock Exchange, and it is a $2 billion revenue company with more than 2,000 employees around the world. The company's vision is providing innovative chemical solutions for a cleaner, healthier, and more energy efficient world. And here we have an illustration of how our project was developed. As Zach was saying, we worked with the client to establish 4 phases that started with the research part, in which we delivered report findings and a thorough research about guidelines.
Gabriella,
Sorry.
Gabriella, can you speak up a little bit?
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe get closer to a computer. And before you move forward, like a little bit of trivia. Zach, you didn't know like Gantt was a Stevens alum.
I did hear that after I learned what a Gantt chart was, but not before. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yep.
Is it better now, Professor?
Yeah, it's better.
Yeah, I'm getting closer to the mic. Okay, so here, as I said, the 4 phases. The first one is the research part. The second phase comprehends the study of the carbon footprint and the overall company's strategy, so we could assess how internal carbon pricing or ICP would fit the business. After that, in phase 3, we developed a thorough competitor analysis based on an extensive peer benchmarking, as well as case studies on companies that are a leader in terms of internal carbon pricing. And then the final phase was the actual development of the ICP strategy, in which we delivered an ICP tool that Rachel will present next. And this tool was developed based on all the findings and relevant information we gathered during the entire process of research, for example. Yeah, next. So before we go on to the project scope, this is an illustration of how a shadow price works. For those who don't know, internal carbon pricing comprehends some different methods, and one of them is the shadow price, which is what the client asks from us. Shadow price is a theoretical cost per ton of carbon emissions that is used to better understand the potential impacts of these emissions on, for example, a new investment or a new business model, for example. So in this case, there's no money flow. It's only a hypothetical cost that is added to the financial cost in order to better inform decision makers. So according to CDP, the shadow price has these 4 dimensions here. 2 of them, the dimensions form the actual carbon value that will be used in business decisions. That, for example, influence on business decisions shapes the impact that ICP can have and how further it affects the company's business decisions. And time defines the impact of ICP over time in shaping the business and how the carbon pricing will affect the business in the future. So next, this is the project scope. The first box is the ask from the client, which comprehends the development of the entire strategy, including case studies and proposed prices. As Zach said, everything was well established along with our clients, so we made sure that we would meet the exact requirements and deliverables they were expecting from us. And the second box shows exactly what we as consultants developed and delivered to meet these clients' requirements. And these, of course, include the ICP tool. And next. And this is the project approach that we had, which gives the details about each phase that I previously presented, the 4 phases. So, for example, for the background information and research, we produced various deliverables that were essential to the client to better understand the strategy. In this part, our job included presentations discussing trends, drivers, challenges and benefits of adopting ICP, risks and liabilities that could arise, regulations around the world involving carbon pricing, and of course the scope and boundaries and the expected outcomes for the project. As you all can see, this was a very long part of our project, so research is a big component of this project. The other phases also have a detailed explanation here. So this is just a summary and an illustration on the project approach. So yeah.
All right. So in terms of deliverables that we were able to give to SEPAN was we had 4 specific case studies. We had an ICP tool that you can plug in certain parameters and it would generate a cost. Then we gave them a strategic alignment PowerPoint in which they can align their goals and initiatives, given their operations and emissions to the carbon price. And then we had kind of a change management, right? How do you get people, particularly maybe in finance or engineers operation, how do you get someone that isn't mainly sustainability focused on board. So we had little, deliverables for, the greater organization, as well as specific to the sustainability team. All right, so one of the main deliverables we had was the research benchmarking. So this was something that Stepan gave us at the beginning of the project. They provided us 20 of their, most closely related, companies or industry partners. So we took them and, compiled this sort of, Excel spreadsheet, which we'll dive into a little bit.
Hey guys, can you give a very brief introduction of what kind of company Stepan is so that people can understand,
So
who
yeah,
they
so they're like a specialty chemical manufacturer. So they have a lot of chemicals that are involved in household products, such as like non-stick formulas and things of that nature. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in.
I'll jump in quick too. Yeah, so they make a lot of what you call as a surfactant, which is in like soaps and like shampoos and stuff like that. So they're a big part of their company is kind of making certain chemicals and things that go inside of like common household products that you'd use.
That's great.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of these companies deal with, specific, the industry is specifically like chemical manufacturing. So the kind of beginning, we had the company and then we had their internal reports. So we compiled all the information from their sustainability reports, or we looked at their CDC climate questionnaires, which you'll learn a lot about in, Professor Noah's class. And then we had their current CDP score. Next, we had their emissions. So we broke them down, right, with scope 1, 2, and 3, and then whether or not they were aligned with SBTI. So if their, emissions targets were science-based, and then we broke down their short and long-term emissions goals. So mainly what we were looking for here is, hey, are there any specific companies that stand out? And, are these certain parameters similar to Stepan's? So if that's the case, then we could further dive into their strategy for carbon price implementation. And then, so then we dug into whether or not they have an internal carbon price or if they were going to implement one in the next 2 years. So luckily for us, CDP has a question on their questionnaire, which asks this specifically to companies. So it was, readily, I mean, I don't want to say readily available, but they made it pretty easy for us to find. And then after we did find them, we tried to dive deeper in, right? Let's try to find the scope of their carbon price. So was it a shadow price, straight up carbon tax? And then what was the reason? The width, we were talking about what types of decisions it would be included in. So whether that's solely CapEx or research and development or, scope 3. Then we had the price, and then whether or not it was uniform based on geography.
And I'll just jump in to say that Mark and Gabriella did an amazing job on this list because, as you can see, kind of giving Stepan a better idea of what their competitors are doing was really important for them in terms of deciding whether to go with an ICP, and once decided if they're going with an ICP to kind of present it to the higher board who might not be so sustainability minded, but say something like, oh, look at this, 65% of people in the industry are adopting ICP and 37.5% intend to adopt it. So kind of showing them that this is the way things are getting pushed, that we should jump on this bandwagon early so that we're not kind of left in the dust and struggling at the end.
Yeah, excellent point. And then I know based off of it, we weren't able to kind of find the specific roadmap for implementation, which led us to look at the following case studies.
Okay, can you go back, please? Yeah, thanks. So our team developed 4 case studies. Microsoft is one of them because the company is by far the one that mostly applies ICP in their business. So they have great examples and mature tools and strategies in this regard. DSM, same situation. They are mentioned by CDP as one internal carbon pricing mature company. And Solvi and Croda, they were actually among the case studies because they are important competitors of our client and they already adopt ICP. So it was a good showcase for Stefan at that point. Yeah, so here we have the example of Croda International. We provided all the specifics and lots of information about how they apply carbon pricing to their decarbonization strategy. And we included 2 instances of how YCP shaped decisions in the company and how successful it was. So this is the example of Croda, but we did the same for these other 3 companies as well, including the successful examples of the ICP implementation in order to motivate our client to see the real world benefits of internal carbon pricing.
Thank you. Awesome. Now I'll go through the ICP tool that our team created. So just a bit of background. I know we kind of touched on, I guess, just like the sheer amount of research that was before developing the tool. A really important piece is understanding, what are the actual emissions of the company and the scopes that they have data on before you can even determine essentially what categories of your carbon emissions you're going to apply this carbon price to. So just that kind of alone is, a lot of information together. So we were really fortunate. Stepan had actually just done kind of an inventory of their carbon emissions. And essentially kind of drilling down, you can tell from their 2021 carbon footprint, roughly like 90% of their emissions come from scope 3, which is to be expected of a company, that sells chemicals. And then kind of drilling down further into that scope 3, it was identified to us that 83% of their total emissions came from their purchased goods and services category. So for us, and just because we had such a short time to kind of develop this internal carbon pricing tool, we decided to focus on that specific category and illustrate how you could apply, shadow pricing to this category. So that is what our team did. Go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is an example of just some of the data that we were able to kind of collect and then generate a carbon price for, or shadow price for. So again, this was on purchased goods and services. And for those of you who aren't familiar with, the scopes of carbon footprint, essentially that's trying to capture the amount of emissions that are released from, whatever products or goods that you're buying to either sell your products or to create things. So for Stepan, they're buying a lot of these different chemicals that then they sell to other people. So they're like purchased goods and services is essentially trying to capture the emissions that go into kind of all the steps before they actually have the product that they're going to sell. So you can see like all of these, the eco-invent activity that's all the way on the left, those are all like the crazy chemicals that they're selling. So essentially what you need to generate the shadow price, you need an emissions factor. So similar to calculating a carbon footprint, that's kind of a core tenet of this. And then what you can do is apply essentially a shadow price to that emissions. And that's kind of what we did here. We also had created a whole bunch of graphs and charts that kind of aligned with some of their financial data that they had shared with us, as we wanted to make sure, when people were filling out kind of deciding where to source different products from, they could choose one that was more sustainable. That was kind of what they were looking for. At the time, they had a project where they had kind of this existing list of chemicals that they had been sourcing from, and they wanted to lower their emissions by choosing essentially more sustainable, either raw materials or kind of source them more sustainably. So shadow price is a great way to demonstrate to people who maybe don't understand kind of have a concept behind, what the kind of differences in different carbon emissions, just kind of applying a price to that. So you can see based on these estimates that they gave us, their 2021 carbon emissions for DEG was, roughly 280,000. Essentially, if you're sourcing a material more sustainably, that would reduce the tons of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere. And then the shadow price is demonstrating, here's the social savings of using a more sustainable product. So this is just one example. There are many of how you can apply a shadow price, but this was kind of one of the key ways they wanted to do so. I know that was super quick overview, but and then another really important thing that our team spent a lot of time on was actually recommending prices to StepPan. So again, the idea of the shadow price is to capture essentially what's called the social cost of carbon. So, you emit, per 1 ton of carbon dioxide, all of the different associated
I think she froze.
capture. What would it cost to essentially clean up after yourself?
Rachel, we lost you for a few seconds.
Oh, sorry. Okay,
No,
sorry.
it's not your problem. They take your screen froze.
Okay, I'll start again from
Okay.
shadow price is trying to capture the social cost of emitting 1 ton of carbon dioxide. So essentially what that price tries to capture is, if you were going to spend the money to clean up after yourself, how much would it cost theoretically? And so there's a whole bunch of recommended prices that are out there. Like, for example, the Biden administration, the social cost of carbon that they have released is $51. I think that was as of 2022. But if you look at, for example, UC Berkeley did a study earlier this year that kind of estimated that should be roughly $185. Just so one really important point to drive home is there's a huge range that you could be using. So it was really important for us to, work with StepPan to figure out what was a price that made sense that you could demonstrate, by either, for example, in the case of sourcing, by going through more responsible sourcing routes, or changing the raw materials that you're using in selling. How could you lower that social cost of carbon? Awesome. And then kind of one last point, another thing that we kind of worked on with them were really the geographical and the temporal boundaries, which we went through earlier. So our kind of immediate strategy that we kind of provided to them was the idea of this uniform shadow price, which essentially means there would be one single price across all of their different business decisions and regions. So I think in the case of Microsoft, as well as some other companies, you can actually have different shadow prices dependent on what scope you're looking at in terms of carbon emissions, or what region you're coming from. But for companies that are just starting out, it's really a good idea to just start with one single price and even just one specific aspect of your kind of carbon footprint. And then I think another really important kind of point to drive home here. Again, a lot of the CDP data suggested that, most of the companies that we looked at, their competitors, utilize just one common price. It can be less accurate, but it's a lot easier to implement because it's a lot less, data to keep up with. But then kind of in the long run, we recommended, moving towards the idea of an evolving price, which again, people tend to implement once they kind of have a feel for, how does a shadow price work? How do we educate our internal employees on this? And essentially that means the shadow price changes over time. It can change across regions. It can be, different dependent on what business unit you're working with. Again, it's a lot more to manage that. You need to essentially have a whole team that's constantly working on it. So it can be a lot harder to implement. This is a really quick overview of just some of the things that, our team had to think about and what we worked on with StepPan.
Sorry. So as we were crafting the ICP tool, we needed to ensure that it aligned with, Stepan's, mission statement and their sustainability goals. We had to get them on board and saying, hey, this will make it easier for you to achieve these. So in terms of, aligning with your mission statement, Stepan's mission statement was to provide innovative chemical solutions for a cleaner, healthier, more energy efficient world. So, in terms of energy efficiency, finding out like what's the true cost of your scope 2 emissions, what your energy purchases are, so you can make more informed decisions. And then their sustainability goals, they had 3 main points. One was to reduce their scope or absolute emissions by 10% from a 2016 baseline by 2025. Then they had a goal of 80% R&D spend towards sustainable processes and products by 2023. And then finally, to generate 20% of global electricity through renewables by 2025. So looking at their first goal, how can a carbon price help achieve this, is simply by understanding the true costs of your operations. So if you're looking at, and not only looking at the true cost, but you can identify emissions hotspots. So you can find out the areas that have the greatest potential for reduction on, the greatest return on investment. So if you're applying, a carbon price of, $40, if you have a high emissions area and you have an alternative, source of energy, that's, $30, right? That would make you go towards that route, that purchase, as opposed to the regular business as usual mindset, which helps you lower reduction. So that's kind of tying into goals 1 and 3. And then looking at sustainable products, right? We can look at life cycle emissions and, find out the true costs of goods and services. And then, in itself, an ICP can be identified as a sustainable process. And then, in terms of broader ESG priorities, looking at TCFD's framework, they very much prioritize climate risks and opportunities. So one of the main climate risks is, in terms of regulatory risks. So there is a, pretty big confidence among, institutional investors and companies that down the road, there's going to be a carbon tax, we're seeing it, in the EU, in some areas in Japan, and the US tends to be a little bit further behind in these decisions, but nonetheless, they're on their way. So if you were to implement, internal carbon price in, 2023, you're going to be hitting the ground running in 2025, because, in 2023, the funds generated can be, used as a green fund or strictly for investment purposes. But in 2025, none of that money is going to come back. It's all going to be, redistributed, to the government. And then looking at, ESG governance and data, in terms of like risk management, just kind of seeing how, climate change is going to affect your operations. So having, an ICP like in place to identify areas of reduction can, help mitigate these risks.
Okay, so back to our roadmap. On the left side, we have the same image that I showed at the beginning of this presentation that shows how we divided our project in 4 phases. At this point, after phase 4, our job was done. So on the right side of the screen, there are the following phases. They are supposed to be the client's responsibilities from now on, as it comprehends the actual implementation of our work. So phase 5 is the rolling out of the project, the which is the ICP approach, which means testing it through a pilot project and planning the rollout for the rest of the company's business. Phase 6 is actually a forever ongoing phase that comprehends the monitoring and evaluation of the ICP approach, also involving the enforcement of the ICP. And here we have a suggestion that we made for them to tackle these two remaining phases. They are their responsibility now. This is part of our of the internal education. We recommended them to use our various presentations that we delivered as a form to educate everybody that will be involved. And we actually use the tool that Rachel presented that we developed. And we also suggested periodical updates for employees so they can feel motivated as they see the benefits of ICP throughout the time.
Okay, and then kind of just circling back, we talked to you guys a lot about our project. I wanted to quickly touch on managing deliverables because I felt like that's something that our team had to kind of quickly get a grasp of and understand. So like I was saying before, just working through client and class deliverables, it can be super challenging. Some of the best ways around it, routinely meet with the clients, so be on the same page with deliverables. I can speak for the team in saying when we first met with Stepan, they kind of had complete like similar ideas to what they wanted to do, but different deliverables to like our third or fourth meeting with Stepan. So kind of sometimes just working with the client and seeing what they really want and what it really is best for them based on our strengths and what we can provide, I thought was really important. And along with meeting with the clients, like I said, of course, meeting in a team. Just noting the due dates for class presentations, I found that to be really important too, because there'd be weeks where we had a presentation that we wanted to deliver to Stepan and present to Stepan, but also a class presentation, which we needed different slides for, some different content. So kind of managing that time and those expectations. Maybe like two of us worked heavily on ensuring the presentation for our client was, or our class was good, while the other three of us focused on just kind of having our presentation ready for the client versus class. So just making sure you're on top of everything, because it can get a bit burdensome having deliverables, let's say bi-weekly or once a month even for your client. And then the same thing for class presentations, especially when they're on the same topic, but they're different things that you need to present. And then lastly, I can speak for myself, and I know I can speak for the team in saying that we are all proud of how much work we put in and kind of all of the meetings we had together to deliver what we felt was the best possible kind of product that we could deliver. So I feel like that's really important to kind of getting yourself the best possible deliverable and the best possible grade in class. And it's really important. I know Gabriella shared with us and some other people from the team that this work with the client was integral into them getting into jobs and internships. And yeah, it's really important to kind of treat this as if you're in a real job, because a lot of this can go right onto your resume. Like some of the work you did here, you do in this project can go right onto your resume, and really helps kind of teach you about projects that you'll have in the real world in sustainability and managing tasks and being on time for everything. So I think that's a really important thing to know. And we'll leave, let's see, oh, perfect time. We'll leave the last few minutes, and then we'll stay after for the SM students, just for any questions that you guys may have. Feel free to ask as much as you want. It can be more generally about the class, or it can be more specific about our work with Stepan and ICP. So I'll stop talking now, and we'll see what you guys have.
So that was a great presentation.